So good morning, everyone. I'd now like to call to order this meeting of the Human Resources Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee of Waterfront Toronto. As I've been advised that a quorum is present, it's appropriate to proceed. Firstly, I welcome all those who are joining our meeting today. We have a number of important items to cover, and we appreciate your interest and participation. And I'd also like to remind you that the open session of today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the public for the public to view. I'd also like to advise that we are going to be joined today by our board chair, Steve Diamond, who will lead one of the matters before us. And also a few other notes. Councillor Malik is unable to attend today. She sends her regrets. She is with the Housing Committee this morning, and we will be doing a follow-up after this meeting. And also welcome to Jeannie and Drew. So thank you very much for joining us. So before we get into the business of the meeting, as our custom, we'll commence with a land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. Okay, so now we're moving into approving the motion for the minutes. So our first item of business is the approval of the meeting agenda. We've restructured a bit here in order to accommodate the schedule of our board chair joining us. And so we're going to be dealing with item 12 being the year-end performance assessment for the CEO as item 10. And then also deal with item 11 in the recruitment matter before moving on to what is now item 10. So may I please have a motion to approve the revised agenda for the meeting? Is there a mover? Thank you, Raoul. A seconder? Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Paul. So the motion to approve the revised agenda is moved, and then we're moving on to the declaration of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? None declared. We can now move on to the business of the meeting. So the next up is the consent agenda. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the open session of March 8th, 2023 meeting. May I please have a motion to approve the March 8th, 2023 meeting open session minutes? Is there a mover?
Paul moves.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raoul. Any discussion? Okay, so that is moved as well. So now we are moving on to, where are we now? So now we are moving on to, are we doing the ESG update here with Lisa? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I understand that Lisa Taylor is unable to join us today, but we have Anton Podjasok, who's our Acting Director of Sustainability, to speak with us briefly on the report and answer any questions. Anton, over to you.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I'm happy to report that we just recently completed Waterfront Toronto's second materiality assessment. The previous one, the first one, was done about 3 years ago. So we're right on time because the materiality assessments are completed per industry standard every 2 to 3 years. We followed the Global Reporting Initiative protocols, known as the GRI guidelines. So the purpose of a materiality assessment, an ESG materiality assessment, is it prioritizes key areas called material topics pertaining to an organization's operations and activities to strengthen its strategy, management, performance, and most importantly, public reporting. It gains internal and external stakeholder insights related to ESG topics. Really, it's a listening exercise with their stakeholders. In terms of improvements from the previous materiality assessment, I'm happy to report that we had this year 255 participants versus 31 with the previous one. I think this is an indication that our stakeholders are engaged, and I'd like to thank everyone that took the time to fill out the survey and participate. Another significant improvement was the focus on picking priority areas. So the questions were tweaked through collaborative efforts with Cameron and his team. So very much a collaborative effort, working cross-functionally with comms, the CFO's office, and procurement that helped us a lot. So on to highlights. Happy to report that over 75% of stakeholders, and this was reported by our third party that did the analysis, over 75% of our stakeholders surveyed believe that Waterfront Toronto is above average or the most committed to ESG. So this really does demonstrate Waterfront Toronto's leadership in ESG. So on to the results. The primary materiality topics with the greatest positive impact. So I'll mention the top 6. Waterfront access. So that was that also came up in the previous assessment from 3 years ago. Parks and open space came up to the top 3. So our stakeholders very interested in what we do for parks and open space. Green space topic is number 3, and that was also in the previous assessment. A new addition this year, based on our collaboration, was brownfields redevelopment. So I was kind of curious how that was going to do with their stakeholders. And it consistently came up to the top with all 3 categories: internal stakeholders, external government stakeholders, and the newsletter. Design excellence and innovation and accessibility were both materiality topics that were high in the previous one as well. So there is a lot of consistency there. So next steps, the materiality assessment results are used to help inform topics of interest in the integrated annual report. So that is currently being woven into the integrated annual report. A second next step is that, or consideration is that we utilize the findings to help inform future strategic planning discussions. So perhaps for the next version of the 5-year rolling strategic plan, this is considered as an input, perhaps from a future targets perspective as well for those 6 top items. Certainly, as the Director of Innovation Sustainability, Ella and I can use the findings to help inform our sustainability program and further inform our new climate action plan. And finally, I just want to say that there's an ESG session planned with the senior management team and the board in the fall. I believe it's the board retreat for a deeper dive of ESG and materiality assessment. Any questions?
Thank you, Anton. Really interesting work and very valuable. And we look forward to more discussion in the fall, certainly at the board retreat. Are there any questions from the directors for Anton? No? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anton. So we'll now move on to our Human Resources report from Rose, our VP of Human Resources.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning, everybody, and happy Pride Month. Welcome to this meeting. We're very excited to give you some updates. There's a lot in the agenda, so I'm going to take the HR report as read and just do some really quick highlights, but happy to answer any questions at the end. With respect to our recruitment, talent, and succession management areas, you'll see that we provided updated recruitment numbers where we are as of March 31st, because if you recall, we've aligned all our reporting for our meetings to the quarter that ended just before these meetings. Happy to say that despite continued labor shortages across sectors, we still hired and onboarded 4 new staff in the last quarter. They were all full-time positions. But I'm really excited to share the overall fiscal year numbers. We onboarded 27 new staff, and of those 27, 11 were full-time, 16 were contract, which also included 6 summer interns. On the exit and offboarding side of things, we had 17 total exits, 9 which were voluntary, 3 were non-voluntary, and 5 were end of contract. If you looked at the KPI dashboard, you'll see that our voluntary employee turnover rate is the lowest it's been in 3 years, 10.6. It's probably back to the pre-pandemic numbers, very close at 10.4. So with the low turnover rate, it still supports our ability to retain staff through total rewards, our continued investment in employee relation programs, and overall staff satisfaction. I'm not going to go through all the KPIs unless you'd like me to answer any questions. I'm happy to do so. I'll just continue on with some of the other important things we've been working on. We continue to work on a formalized succession plan that was presented by George at the HRGSR meeting in Q3 for the senior management roles. And we're working on other key positions as well to identify talent pools of potential internal candidates and ensure that the appropriate development and learning plans are reflected in the PFS programs and individual learning plans. We continue to work in a hybrid environment with staff coming into the office 5 days over 2 weeks. And as of April, although you'll get more information in the next meeting, we started a once a month staff all-in days where we provide at least a half-day worth of programming that could include town hall, team building exercises, and walking tours to educate staff on our projects. In preparation for our office move at the end of the year, we continue to support staff in our office cleanup projects and provide them information updates at staff town halls. We continue to support staff with well-being and mindfulness webinars. And last but not least, on DE&I, at the last meeting, you had been updated and advised that we had finished a training needs assessment survey. We presented those findings after having them analyzed by M&P to our staff in February. We've gotten some great information on how staff wants to learn, the time capacities and parameters. We're working with external facilitators to review content and pricing, and we're going to start some DE&I training in Q3 of this year. And we're going to continue to work on recommendations as part of our DE&I strategy. Tried to keep it short, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rose. Any questions for Rose? Raul?
Sure. Maybe it's even picked up in one of George's memos. I'm curious to know how the 5 and 10 is working in the hybrid right now and how that's stacking up against some of your peers as well.
Well, I can jump in right now, Raul, and just say that it's been very positive. People have been, I think, very respectful of the need to be in and engage with our stakeholders, because that's the other part of the job, is to be engaging with stakeholders. And I'll get into this in more detail as I describe the accomplishments over the last year. A lot of our role is to support the development along the waterfront and engage with those stakeholders. So I think we're, even though we started earlier, some others are pushing staff now 3 days a week and having difficulty. We started intervening earlier in terms of bringing people back. So I think the adjustment has been less for staff. So we haven't really had a lot of friction in terms of that.
No, and just to add to that, if I may, Raul, if we need staff to come in for more days, because as George said, interaction with some of our partners or just projects in the office, there's been no pushback at all. Staff understands that we went from 5 days to 0 to slowly coming back in. They've been, pretty supportive of it.
So the one thing I would add, Rose mentioned it, we added a 1 day a month all-in day, and part of that was we had people in for a certain day and the energy level was so high and people wanted to get back together. And we had staff that we've hired. We've got some brilliant young staff that we've hired. They haven't met the rest of the staff. So I think you'll see that we'll continue that. We'll always monitor. I'm always flexible too. I've told staff, in the wintertime, we'll adjust accordingly if the weather is bad. We use that as a guide, and I think staff have really been respectful of the need to come in, and we haven't had any pushback.
So 2 things I'm taking away from that. It's not a competitive disadvantage in recruiting now. I'm taking that away. Second, just a follow-up quick question. Are you intending to continue the 5 and 10 at the new location?
Yes. So we're going to continue to monitor, Raul. As I said, we'll look to see, how ready the building is for us. So if we need to work from home for a week or 2, we may do that. So we will continue that, and we'll monitor to see what our partners are doing and adjust accordingly. So, one thing I've mentioned to all the staff, we are going to do this in a way that's respectful and engaging with our staff. We use our health and safety committee and engage them as we talk about the back to work situation. So I think we'll keep it at that level and not just accordingly, either up or down.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions for Rose or George?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to our next item, which is item number 6, and it's the staff performance review. And so as directors are aware, the fiscal year end of the corporation is March 31st, and it's at this meeting and at our next board meeting later this month that we'll receive a report from management on the staff performance review for the year. And this is part of the mandate of our committee, and materials are contained in the board book, but I wanted to take this opportunity to thank George and the entire Waterfront Toronto team for their work over the past year. As George noted in his report, this was another extremely busy and productive year for Waterfront Toronto. And although much of the public attention has been on the high-profile projects of Portland's and flood protection, Portland's flood protection and Quayside, much more has been achieved, and George will highlight this in our board materials. And I'll also note that more detailed information will be available in the closed session. George, so I'll now ask you to present your report.
Thank you, Wendy. And let me just start by saying just how extremely proud I am of the performance of our staff this past year. As almost on every measure that we have, it was our best year ever. So I just wanted to thank the staff, and also I want to thank the board for the direction and support that we needed to get through this year. And whether achieving our biggest land deal ever, actually, I'm going to ask, sorry, Charmaine, can you go to the next page? I'll get to the ratings in a sec. So as Wendy said, we had some major achievements, whether achieving the biggest land deal ever under difficult economic times and ensuring that our proponent met all of the public policy requirements we needed, or continuing to deliver one of North America's largest infrastructure projects with minimal cost increases and delays in months, not years. And then working on some of the great parks that we've been developing, including Love Park, which will be opening very shortly. And then receiving our broadest and best media coverage and positive public engagement, and also finally receiving great audit and program reviews, not only from a fiscal perspective in terms of proper stewardship, but also identified as a model for other agencies and government departments with regards to the way we engage with our Indigenous communities. So on all levels, and I won't go through all of the pages, but as Wendy pointed out, those are big projects, but we do a lot of projects on behalf of the city themselves. So they contract us to do parks and road work and major construction on their behalf. But also, we do a number of projects in terms of proceeding with artwork, some of our philanthropy, engaging in a number of community events. I would say this year is the first year post-pandemic that we've been extremely active out in the community, both in terms of attending events and also just in terms of engaging. And, we just had recently our open house and our panel on our destination play. And all of the feedback that I'm getting, I actually get stopped in the street by a number of our stakeholders just thanking us for the direction that we've taken and the great work that we're doing. The other thing I would want to mention is in terms of our annual report and our strategic plan, that's been acknowledged as best in class, and not just by agencies, but even the Prime Minister's office had asked us if it was okay to share that as a model for other departments. So the work that we've done this past year under challenging economic times, and I would say, that is not to be understated. We've delivered on everything, and to Raul, your point, I think we have very strong employee engagement. We'll talk, a bit as Rose identified. We've engaged them in our move. We've engaged them in the values and purpose of the organization, so they feel very involved. So, as I said, I think it's been the most progressive in terms of accomplishing all of our milestones that we've had in the history of Waterfront Toronto. I would also say that, just to give a little context, and I made an adjustment. If we can go to the ratings, for those board members who've been around, they would know when I came in, we had a very strong, I would say, fiscal review. And we were tough, quite frankly, on our salaries. We froze our salaries for the first couple of years. We used to rate people prior to my arrival in the top 2 categories. So we have 5 categories. 5 categories are achieves expectations plus, and achieves all expectations. So that's doing a good job. And then we had 2 lower ones, which were achieve some expectations and expectations not achieved. Well, as I said, prior that we would rate 40% of our staff in the top 2 categories. So 40% EEs, 40% AEPs. We've taken a much more rigorous review to deal with consistency and just in terms of expectations of what an EE is versus an AAE. So you will have seen over the years, we went from 40% in that top category to this year, I think we're at 13%. And we've moved a lot of people in that middle category, which is still a very well-performing employee. So we do that not just by my ratings, I do it as a team with our executive team. So everybody's involved, and that also allowed us to have more consistency. The other thing is that I would point out that is helping us a bit now, because in the benchmarking review, we were way behind in terms of the target that we had being in the 50th percentile. The HRGSR committee and the board approved some tools for me to address some salary gaps. We're, as I said, way behind even in terms of the average 50th percentile. Those tools are being applied now, and as I told the board, I'm addressing the lower paid individuals, and partly because, quite frankly, when we did the salary survey, out of the 11, we invited 15, 11 participated. Not one would share what their CEO salary was. So I just flatlined myself and froze myself at that salary, but we'll continue to look at what we can do to get better information at the higher level. So people like myself and Meg and David were not adjusted, but we will be making up that gap, but we really want to use the performance as true performance, not as salary market adjustments. So we've separated those two, and I think we're moving forward very productively. So I'm not going to go through all of the report. I think I just point out that we had our best fiscal year. We have been applying due diligence in terms of review, in terms of consistency and expectations, and I'm using other tools to adjust other issues in terms of salaries. So Wendy, I turn it over to you and the committee, and I'll answer any questions that you might have. Wendy, you're on mute.
Thank you, George. Any questions for George from the committee? No. Raul?
Quick one. Not on the substantive, sorry, Paul, not on the substantive, more on the process, George. You know, going through these can be challenging, but has the organization embraced this whole process, performance management and sort of the outcomes?
Yeah, I would say the first year was challenging because we, made a culture change in terms of how we looked at these ratings. But I think people realized we needed to be consistent and we needed to review, quite frankly, performance versus dealing with salary challenges. And we now have tools to deal with that issue. So I would say certainly, and the meetings go much better, and we haven't had a lot of negative feedback with regards to the due diligence that we've applied. And, we have dealt with some other issues. Some of these people have been promoted, and I'll speak to that. So, that reduces some of the other EEs, but I think overall, and I'll let Rose speak to it, I think everybody's embraced it. So
yeah, the process itself, it has been received, adapted, and everybody's well informed about it. The thought process and the cultural change, people have also embraced that. The first year, Raul, it was a little bit tough because people thought that if they weren't an EE, they were a C student. And the way I explain it to our staff, we've got a 5 rating. If you come in, and thanks to our original CEO, he'd say, if you come in and you did your job, you're a rock solid performer, you're an AAE, that's an A student. an AEP for me, and the way we explain it, is an A+ student. And if the world could come back with an A++ student, that's where you'd be an AE. It's not unattainable. You don't need to walk on water, but if you come in and do your job, you should be proud of it. Because of the 5 ratings, people just believe that an AE was mediocre. It was a C student, and that's not what this is about. So they've understood that the cultural change has happened. And sure, we get questions every year because you know yourself, the process may not be the problem. The results could be a problem, and people just need to be accountable for their performance, right? So somebody believes they're an AE and they're really not. You know, I always say you can agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, your manager's recommendation and the internal review board, as George said, because we sit around, we review everybody from the receptionist right up. It's like consensus scoring for procurement. Sometimes managers come in really hard on their staff and just potentially provide an AE when the rest of the team that are reviewing, wait a minute, that person did this, this, and this. So really an EE, George, or team. Yeah. And so we either sometimes talk managers up or talk managers down, but it's always consensus.
I would say, Rahul, the other difficulty in that first couple of years, we froze salaries at the same time.
Yeah.
But, you know, we did a lot to improve the culture in the organization, which is equally important to the pay. So I would say that got us through. And then once we unfroze ourselves and now we're addressing the fact that we are behind market, I think people feel that they're being well respected and treated here. So I don't see a problem.
And it also goes to total rewards because it's not just about cash. We enhanced our benefit programs over the last few years. We have enhanced our learning and development programs, supportive of team members. I think in the almost 21 years that I've been here, yes, I'm the old person, I think I've said no to 2 learning requests. And quite frankly, we're not paying for yoga and we're not paying for basket weaving. It has to be a value to your role here at Waterfront Toronto. It has to be a quick, short value benefit to Waterfront or long-term in your role. So we've been very generous and staff appreciate that.
So my perspective, and then I'll end off here on just a comment, is I know how challenging performance management and the whole system can be, but how important it is. And I would just say to management, if you find that it's a tick the box exercise that people are rolling their eyes back on, but they're going through it, but it's painful and you're not getting the outcomes that you as leaders want to see, got to come back to the board and let us know, because these things need to be tweaked. But if it's tick the box exercise, then it tends to be a waste of everybody's time. I'm not suggesting it is by any stretch. I just know how difficult these can be.
Yeah, and I would say, quite frankly, we would not have gotten the results we've gotten over the last few years if we'd lost the confidence of the staff. And as I pointed out, just in terms of the rigor, you can see we took a much more consistent and rigorous approach to the evaluation. So definitely not tick the box. Everybody has to go through. We went through every single employee in detail in evaluating that as a team. So I would say it's definitely not a tick the box. And I would say that overall, we haven't felt any negativity in performance as a result of the process.
Okay, thank you very much, George and Rose. Any further questions? All right, so let's move on to item number 7 on our agenda, and it's about communications and events. So your meeting package includes, as an item 7, a list of recently held and upcoming public events. And I'd like to thank Leslie Wu for bringing greetings on behalf of the board at the opening night of the Eastern Waterfront Open House a few weeks ago. And I understand Councillor Malik also was able to attend the Value of Play meeting, and we thank her for that. So just a few notable upcoming events, including the opening of Love Park on June 23rd, which is included in your materials. And Cameron is here as well if you have any remarks or questions for him. And as always, directors are encouraged to participate if they possibly can. Cameron, are there any comments that you'd like to make today?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I just wanted to say that we've highlighted the open house. I just wanted to build on what George was saying, because it's sort of core to our communications philosophy, and that is that we are an agency that talks with and not at. And, you know, it used to be back in the day, you'd have marketing communications and you'd push a message. We demonstrate that we kind of inverted that. So we're communications marketers. So we talk about projects with people and we do it face to face. And, you know, we had 270 people come through the open house. We had 700 people on our Portland's platform for open doors coming through. So there's this kind of devouring appetite to be down on the waterfront and learning about projects, and we're really proud of that. And that momentum will carry on through the summer. As you can see, that we've got Love Park opening is going to be a big deal, by the way, and please do join. It's a Friday, but it's getting a lot of play, and people are really excited to see the park open, so please do join. And then we're going to have festivals and events. We're resuming Smorgasbord the day after Love Park opening on the 24th. And that goes through September. And then we're popping up throughout the city. We have about 10 pop-ups at farmers markets and events as well. So it's going to be a busy summer, as we said, but we're looking forward to talking to people and generating visibility for the projects and the good work that the corporation does.
Thank you, Cameron. Very good work. Any questions for Cameron from the committee or directors? Okay, so let's yes, it looks great, and very, very good work with the open houses. I've heard some wonderful remarks from the community. So moving on to item number 8, and welcoming our board chair, Steve Diamond, who's with us now. So that's terrific. Thanks, Steve. We're going to have a motion to move into closed session. So may I please have a motion to go into the closed session to discuss items 9, 10, 11, and 12 of today's agenda. And I
Move the motion.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raul. And I just want to remind everyone that any resolution considered in the closed session also needs to be passed when the meeting returns to the open session. Okay, so we've now returned to the open session and resumed the recording of the session. And there are 2 resolutions arising from the closed session for us to consider. First, may I please have a motion to approve the March 2nd, 2023 committee meeting closed session minutes? Is there a mover? Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Paul.
I seconded.
Any discussion? Okay, thanks very much. The closed session meeting minutes are approved. And also, may I now have a motion to recommend for approval the board recruitment action plan that our CEO has shared with us in closed session. The form of resolution is in our book. May I please have a motion?
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you,
I move.
Paul. Thank you, Raul, as
second.
seconder. And so that motion is approved in terms of the recruitment action plan. So now may I have a motion to terminate the meeting? Is there a mover?
Slow down.
Thank you, Raul.
Second.
Thank
I
you,
second.
Paul. Okay, now declare the meeting terminated.